Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. If we were to rank the most unpleasant characters in Harry Potter, Rita Skeeter would definitely land near the top. But if we look deeper, we'll see that in every person, well, except maybe Voldemort, there's at least something good to be found. So let's try to discover Rita Skeeter's brighter sides and go through a few reasons why she might deserve a little more warmth. Enjoy the video. Number 1. She had a unique sense of style. Let's start with her appearance. Rita always aimed to stand out, and she did so in quite an eccentric way. Crocodile skin handbags, bleached blonde hair, jewel-studded glasses. She was impossible to confuse with anyone else. She treated her image creatively, experimented, and thought outside the box. Yes, her personality was unpleasant, but at least she looked bold and unforgettable. Number 2. She was genuinely good at her job. Few would call Rita Skeeter a good journalist from a moral perspective, but if you look through the eyes of an editor or an ordinary reader, things get trickier. She skillfully found scoops, asked the right questions, and made wizards by newspapers. Her methods were questionable, but the results were brilliant. People don't care much about how a journalist gets their information if the material itself is captivating. Number 3. Becoming an animagus was a clever move. Mastering animagus magic is one of the most difficult feats in the wizarding world. In the 20th century, only 7 wizards were officially registered as animagi, and who knows how many were hidden. Rita managed to secretly master this art and transformed into a beetle to eavesdrop on conversations. You have to admit, that was an incredibly smart decision. It showed that Skeeter was not just a scheming journalist, but also a talented witch capable of achieving extremely difficult goals. Number 4. Sometimes she stood up for the right things. Before shifting her attention to Harry, Rita wrote reports about the Ministry of Magic. And here we must admit, sometimes she raised truly important questions. For example, she demanded answers about the fate of the missing Bertha Jorkins. Perhaps her motives were selfish, but the fact remains, shining a light on the Ministry's issues proved very useful. At a time when Voldemort was gaining power, even scandalous articles helped people think about hidden threats. Number 5. She helped Harry. Yes, she did it under pressure from Hermione and for her own gain, but the fact is, Rita interviewed Harry, and thanks to the Quibbler, his words reached many. It can't exactly be called redemption, but in that moment Skeeter showed that even her cynicism couldn't prevent her from occasionally doing the right thing, even if for the wrong reasons. Number 6. She could see the hidden details. Rita Skeeter had an uncanny eye for detail. She could sit across from Harry Potter and notice the flicker of irritation in his face, then twist it into a headline about anger and instability. In Goblet of Fire, when she cornered Harry after the first task, she saw his fatigue and fear. Instead of sympathy, she wrote, "There are those who say he is disturbed and dangerous." She caught the cracks others ignored and turned them into stories that made readers stop and whisper. Hermione was another victim of that sharp gaze. Rita didn't just see her as a clever student. She noticed Victor Crumb's attention, the way he lingered near her, and spun it into something sensational. She exaggerated, of course, but the seed came from her ability to notice what others overlooked. Readers remembered the gossip because it felt like a secret exposed. That was Rita's strength, finding the small detail and amplifying it until it became impossible to ignore. Her methods were ruthless, but her instincts were sharp. She watched faces, listened to tones, and spotted the weaknesses people tried to hide. In doing so, she became a magnifying glass for the wizarding world. Sometimes the picture she painted was distorted, even poisonous, but it was also captivating because Rita Skeeter saw things others could not, and she made sure no one could look away. Number 7. She never gave up. Rita Skeeter was the kind of person who refused to disappear. Even when Hermione caught her as an unregistered beetle animagus and kept her locked in a jar, Rita found a way to stay relevant. She was silenced for months, but she waited, watching for the right moment. That kind of patience showed her resilience. Most would have given up. Rita simply bided her time. Her return came in Order of the Phoenix. Hermione, needing the truth about Voldemort to reach the public, made a deal with her. Rita could write Harry's story, but only under Hermione's rules. Rita accepted, even though it meant swallowing her pride. "The Prophet won't touch this," Hermione told her. "But people do read your work." Rita, bruised but not broken, agreed. That moment proved she would rather adapt than vanish. The fact that she agreed at all was remarkable. Here was a woman used to twisting others, now being twisted herself. Yet she didn't resist. She wrote the interview and let it be printed in The Quibbler. Harry's words spread across Britain. Rita gained nothing from it, but she survived. She lived to write another day. That was her true strength. Her survival wasn't just about stubbornness, it was about instinct. Rita knew when to fight and when to bend. Even when her reputation collapsed, she always found a crack in the wall, a way to slip back into the story. In a world where Voldemort could kill with a flick of his wand and the Ministry could crush dissent overnight, her ability to endure was almost magical in itself. Number 8. She reflected society's reality. Rita Skeeter thrived because people wanted her stories. The wizarding world pretended to value truth and dignity, but the sales of The Daily Prophet told another tale. Readers craved scandal. They leaned over butterbeer in The Three Broomsticks, whispering about her latest article. When she painted Harry as disturbed and dangerous in Goblet of Fire, people didn't dismiss it. They believed it. They repeated it. That showed more about society than about Rita herself. Her articles about Hermione revealed the same weakness. Instead of questioning how a teenage girl could possibly manipulate two famous wizards, readers devoured the gossip. They wanted to imagine a love triangle. They wanted to laugh at the drama. Rita provided what they secretly craved. It was easier to talk about scandalous romances than to face the dark truth of Voldemort's return. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry insisted Voldemort was alive, the Prophet silenced him. Rita mirrored this denial. Her silence wasn't just hers, it was society's. People didn't want fear, they wanted distraction. They wanted an enemy they could laugh at, when a boy seeking attention, a girl breaking hearts. Rita became the voice of those desires, reflecting the cowardice and curiosity of the wizarding world at the same time. That is why her presence mattered. She showed that wizards, despite their wands and ancient traditions, were just as human as muggles. They loved drama, they feared the truth, and they paid for stories that confirmed their feelings. Rita Skeeter held up a mirror, and what stared back was not Voldemort, but the flaws of ordinary witches and wizards. Number 9. She inspired other journalists. Rita Skeeter's style was impossible to ignore, even for those who despised it. Young reporters at the Daily Prophet could see how her stories dominated conversations across the wizarding world. People complained, yes, but they also kept reading. That kind of power was intoxicating. It showed newcomers that journalism could be more than dull notices about ministry policy. It could stir outrage, excitement, and curiosity all at once. Her influence became especially clear during the smear campaign against Harry in Order of the Phoenix. Rita wasn't writing for the Prophet then, but her earlier work had already changed the tone of the paper. The Prophet's new reporters leaned into her methods, publishing headlines that questioned Harry's sanity. "The boy who lies?" echoed the same dramatic style Rita had perfected. Even if she wasn't holding the quill, her fingerprints were on every sentence. Not everyone followed her path. Some journalists saw her exaggerations as a warning of what not to become. When Luna Lovegood's father published The Quibbler, he positioned it as the opposite of Rita's sensationalism, printing stories too strange to be taken as manipulation. Yet even this was a reaction to her. Whether they copied her flair or rebelled against it, they could not escape her shadow. That is the mark of influence. A figure like Skeeter reshaped the profession simply by existing. She proved that words could be weapons, and that a journalist could become as feared as an aura. Love her or loathe her, every young witch or wizard with a quill in hand had to ask themselves the same question: follow Rita's path or fight against it, and that in itself meant she had already won. Number 10. She added humor to the story. Rita Skeeter's presence often turned dark moments into something almost absurd. Her buzzing, quick quotes quill scribbled exaggerated nonsense while she smiled with false sweetness. During Harry's interview in Goblet of Fire, the quill wrote, "Tear glistened in his eye as he spoke of his tragic past," even though Harry sat there scowling. The exaggeration was so over the top that it became comical. Readers could feel the ridiculousness of it, and that gave a strange sense of relief in a story that was otherwise full of danger and fear. Her style of writing carried the same flavor. Instead of presenting facts, she twisted them into melodrama that bordered on parody. When she described Hermione as plain but ambitious, while also accusing her of toying with the hearts of two famous young wizards, it was less threatening and more laughable. The absurdity of seeing serious characters caught in childish gossip broke the tension. It reminded readers that even in the darkest chapters, the wizarding world had its share of ridiculous scandals. Her physical description added another layer of humor. The over-bleached hair, the jeweled glasses, the crocodile skin handbag, she was impossible to take fully seriously. When she appeared at Hogwarts strutting like she owned the castle, she looked more like a caricature than a true villain. That exaggerated appearance turned every one of her scenes into a spectacle. You couldn't help but smirk when she fluttered her eyelashes while twisting the truth. This comical edge gave the narrative balance. Voldemort's rise, Cedric's death, the Ministry's corruption, all of these weighed heavily on the story. Rita's antics acted like sharp spice, cutting through the heaviness. She was irritating, but her ridiculous behavior also made readers laugh when they needed it most. Without Rita Skeeter's absurd humor, the world of Harry Potter might have felt too dark, too suffocating. Instead, she kept the tone unpredictable, adding just enough mischief to keep the story alive. Number 11. She knew how to create drama. Rita Skeeter thrived on spectacle. She had the rare ability to turn the ordinary into something unforgettable. A dull press conference at the Ministry of Magic could become, in her hands, a tale of secret betrayals and hidden dangers. She didn't report events as they happened, she shaped them into performances. Readers didn't just learn the news, they lived inside Rita's drama whether they wanted to or not. Her coverage of Harry during the Triwizard Tournament is the clearest example. Instead of describing a boy nervous before a life-threatening task, she painted him as a tragic figure, desperate for attention. In Goblet of Fire, she wrote, "Tragic Harry. Alone and friendless, the boy who defeated you-know-who is crushed under the weight of fame." Harry hadn't said anything like that. Yet thousands read her words and felt they were part of a grand story, not a simple school competition. Rita knew how to hook her audience, and she did it with flair. Even Hermione wasn't safe from her dramatization. A single moment at the Yule Ball became tabloid gold. Rita turned Victor Crumb's polite interest into a scandal that broke Harry Potter's heart. The truth was innocent, but innocence didn't sell papers. What sold was the image of a young witch at the center of a love triangle. It was cruel, but it kept her name on everyone's lips. She understood the power of exaggeration better than anyone else. Without her, the wizarding world's press would have been nothing but dull proclamations from the Ministry. Rita filled that void with fire. She made readers argue at breakfast tables and whisper in corridors. She didn't just write about events, she staged them. Her drama could be dishonest, even poisonous, but it was never boring. And that, in its own twisted way, was her genius. Number 12. She understood human psychology. Rita Skeeter always knew which words to choose. Her interviews were less about facts and more about striking nerves. When she sat down with Harry Potter during the Triwizard Tournament, she didn't waste time with neutral questions. Instead, she leaned forward and whispered, "How does it feel to be the unwanted boy dragged into danger yet again?" The question was cruel, but it forced Harry to react. She played with emotion like a musician plays with notes, creating a melody that stayed in the mind of her readers. This talent became even clearer in her portrait of Hermione Granger. Rita didn't invent the love triangle out of nowhere. She twisted tiny details into sharp weapons. A kind gesture from Victor Crumb turned into gossip about Hermione toying with the hearts of famous wizards. In Goblet of Fire, Rita wrote, "Miss Granger is playing with both Harry Potter's and Victor Crumb's affections," a line that instantly turned sympathy into suspicion. She knew her audience. She knew jealousy and scandal would sell better than dull facts. Her mastery of psychology lay in her timing. Rita struck when emotions were already boiling. After the first task of the tournament, Harry was exhausted and vulnerable. That was when Rita cornered him, Quill already scratching words he never said. She didn't just ask questions, she planted ideas. She made readers feel as if they had uncovered secrets, when in truth they were absorbing her manipulation. Few characters in the wizarding world could control a conversation with such precision. It was dangerous, but brilliant. Rita's articles rarely told the truth, but they always told a story that people wanted to believe. She sensed the insecurities of teenagers, the hunger of readers, and the pride of officials. Then she turned those weaknesses into headlines. For Harry, Hermione, and anyone else who crossed her path, every word she printed was a reminder. Rita Skeeter didn't just write. She got inside your head. Number 13, she wasn't afraid of powerful figures. Of all the figures who walked through the pages of Harry Potter's world, few inspired such simultaneous disgust and fascination as Rita Skeeter. She was a journalist who lived by scandal, whose words often cut deeper than curses. Yet hidden beneath her quill's venom lies a reason to look at her with something more than contempt. Rita dared to go where others would never tread, unafraid of powerful names, unafraid of consequence. And in that boldness she revealed something rare. While most writers in the wizarding world bowed their heads before authority, Rita lifted her quick quotes quill and aimed it like a weapon, striking even at the untouchable. Her methods were questionable, but her audacity is undeniable, and sometimes that audacity struck where silence had long reigned. Consider her reporting. During the Triwizard Tournament, when Harry himself was cast into the spotlight of her relentless prose. Every word she wrote seemed designed to humiliate him. Harry Potter's secret heartache, she penned, suggesting he was a boy broken by the dangers that surrounded him, a tragic young hero with no one to comfort him. The words stung, and Harry felt the injustice of her exaggerations. Yet behind the twisted picture lay something crucial. She had taken aim at an institution that most wizards dared not criticize. The Triwizard Tournament was organized under the Ministry's eye, and any attack on the event was, by extension, an attack on the competence of those in charge. Rita might have exploited Harry's vulnerability, but she also cracked the polished facade the Ministry wanted to project, showing the public that beneath the pomp and glory, cracks existed. Few others dared to write so boldly. The wizarding world revered authority almost blindly. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic during Harry's early years, was treated like a monarch. His words were rarely challenged in print, his failures carefully concealed. Journalists knew that to cross the minister was to risk professional ruin. Yet Rita Skeeter never seemed to flinch. She did not hesitate to describe Fudge in ways that raised eyebrows, hinting at weakness and poor judgment when the storm of Voldemort's return began to brew. In the Goblet of Fire, when Harry claimed that the Dark Lord was back, Fudge's desperate denial controlled the public narrative. but it was Rita's habit of spinning stories that kept whispers alive. If she was willing to mock Harry or the Ministry, readers were reminded that the Ministry's grip on the truth was never absolute. Her most striking moment came in the Order of the Phoenix. By then, Harry's reputation had been shattered by months of Ministry propaganda. Fudge had branded him a liar, Dumbledore a senile schemer, and the Daily Prophet, under the minister's thumb, obediently published articles that discredited them both. Silence reigned where bravery should have spoken. No journalist was willing to confront the danger of aligning with Harry. No quill dared move against the official version of events, and yet, when Hermione Granger cornered Rita Skeeter and forced her cooperation, it was Rita's writing that became the sharpest blow against the Ministry's lies. Her article, in The Quibbler, recounting Harry's first-hand story of Voldemort's return, broke through the wall of censorship. The words she wrote carried risk, for they challenged the very Ministry that had built its reputation on suppressing that truth. She might have done it reluctantly, bound by Hermione's clever threat of exposing her animagus secret, but the article bore her style, incisive, bold, and fearless. That one article rippled through Wizarding society. Readers of The Quibbler may have been few, but they passed the issue from hand to hand, and soon Harry's voice echoed far louder than the Ministry expected. "He who must not be named returns," the article proclaimed, giving Harry the validation he desperately needed. Rita's motives may not have been noble, but her role in this pivotal moment of resistance cannot be denied. Where others cowered, she wrote, and writing, even in her acerbic and embellished way, carried the force of defiance. To understand the courage behind this, one must remember the fear of that time. Voldemort's name still froze lips, and even hinting at his return could mark someone as dangerous. Fudge wielded enormous power, punishing those who disagreed with him. Journalists knew their livelihoods, even their safety, could vanish with one wrong sentence. The prophet danced to the minister's tune, becoming an echo of authority rather than a guardian of truth. Rita Skeeter, however, was the rare exception. Even when her pen hurt those undeserving, it also pierced those who abused power. She was not the kind of writer who flattered kings. She was the kind of writer who scratched their crowns until the gold looked tarnished. Her lack of fear extended to Albus Dumbledore himself, the one figure most revered in the wizarding world. Other reporters treated him as sacred, a man whose wisdom and authority could not be questioned. Rita, however, devoted entire pages to dissecting him. In her biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, she ventured where no one else dared, revealing secrets about his family and his past. True, her methods were cruel, and much of her work was steeped in distortion, but she did what most others would not. She challenged the mythology of a living legend. She made wizards ask if even the greatest of them were beyond scrutiny. For a society that too often trusted blindly, Rita's irreverence was unsettling but necessary. Number 14, she kept even her enemies on edge. Under the bright lights of the Triwizard Tournament, Rita Skeeter appeared like an uninvited shadow, trailing the champions with her acid green quill that scratched more eagerly than any curse. She was unwelcome, distrusted, and in many ways despised. Yet her presence created a pressure that could not be ignored. Harry, Hermione, and their friends discovered that the scrutiny of Skeeter forced them to behave differently, to measure their words, to protect their truths. The hostility she inspired was undeniable, but so was the discipline she demanded. To love Rita Skeeter may be impossible, but to recognize the strange necessity of her role is to acknowledge a paradox. She was an enemy who sharpened the defenses of heroes. When Harry first encountered Skeeter during the tournament, he felt her as a looming threat, not merely an observer. The quill did not record facts, it twisted them into something darker, more scandalous. She wrote of Harry's tragic past and stormy adolescence, exploiting grief for public entertainment. Yet this taught Harry something crucial. that the truth, however simple, could be manipulated if not carefully guarded. Her presence turned him into a reluctant strategist. The boy who often spoke impulsively now learned that even his silence could be turned into a weapon against him. Hermione, too, found herself reshaped by Rita's intrusions. Skeeter mocked her as the frizzy-haired know-it-all who had supposedly toyed with Harry and Victor Crumb at the same time. The cruelty of the articles was unbearable, but Hermione refused to play the victim. Instead, she became sharper, more observant, and more dangerous to Skeeter than Skeeter was to her. Hermione uncovered Rita's deepest secret, that she was an unregistered animagus, a beetle who could slip unnoticed into private conversations. In this way, Skeeter's aggression transformed Hermione into a detective and protector. The sharp edges of Skeeter's gossip inspired equally sharp defenses from those who opposed her. What is remarkable is that Rita did not vanish even when silenced. Hermione's capture of the animagus beetle put Skeeter under control for a time, confined in a jar and later bound by blackmail. Yet the anxiety Rita had awakened never disappeared. Harry and Hermione both carried with them the knowledge that words could be as damaging as curses. When Skeeter later returned during the events of the Daily Prophet smear campaign against Harry and Dumbledore, the lessons had already been absorbed. Skeeter had trained them, unwillingly, to withstand distortion and lies. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry faced the brutal disbelief of the wizarding world, who doubted his account of Voldemort's return. Although Skeeter was not the loudest voice in this storm, her earlier inventions had paved the path for others to slander him. This could have broken a boy who longed for truth to be accepted. But because Skeeter had already twisted his story once, Harry knew that the world's opinion was fickle and unreliable. His resilience in the face of the Prophet's attacks was in part forged in the fire of Skeeter's earlier cruelty. He had been tested by her ink before the world turned on him completely. Hermione's later manipulation of Skeeter to publish Harry's side of the story in The Quibbler demonstrates a profound irony. The same journalist who had once humiliated them became the instrument of justice. Skeeter had no choice. Hermione held her secret hostage, but her skill as a writer was undeniable. She could reach readers in ways that the truth, spoken plainly, often could not. Hermione understood that even poison, if guided properly, could become medicine. Thus, Skeeter's greatest strength, her ability to grip public attention, became a weapon in the fight against Voldemort's silence. Without her quill, Harry's voice might have been lost in the noise. Consider the way Dumbledore spoke of truth and lies. The truth is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution. Skeeter embodied the terrible side of that truth, the one that twisted beauty into a spectacle. But she also taught the young heroes to treat truth with caution, to defend it against corruption. She was not the kind of teacher Hogwarts would have had, but she was a teacher nonetheless, delivering her lessons with ink instead of wand-light. There is also the reality that Skeeter's sharpness mirrored the darkness of the wizarding world more honestly than many respectable figures. Politicians like Cornelius Fudge preferred polite lies. Skeeter preferred ugly ones. Yet in that ugliness, Harry and his friends found clarity. They saw that reputation was fragile, that secrets were easily shattered, and that enemies did not always wield wands. This perspective made them more prepared for the cunning cruelty of Voldemort's followers, who thrived not only in violence, but also in deception. The Triwizard Tournament itself is proof of this lesson. Every task forced Harry into danger, but Skeeter forced him into a different kind of battle, survival against public opinion. She wrote of him fainting in nightmares, of his connection to dangerous individuals, and of his supposed arrogance. Each line was exaggerated, but each taught Harry that surviving dragons and mazes was not enough. He needed to guard his mind, his words, his friendships. The arena of reputation was as treacherous as any enchanted lake. Hermione's pursuit of Skeeter and her eventual triumph also shows the essential value of enemies. In trapping Skeeter, Hermione grew into a strategist. She did not merely silence a nuisance, she mastered the art of controlling an opponent. "You're an unregistered animagus," she reminded Skeeter, holding her future in her hands. The Gryffindor student became more Slytherin in that moment, proving that survival in a treacherous world sometimes required cunning as sharp as any serpent's. Skeeter, by threatening her, had unknowingly nurtured her ability to fight with intellect rather than brute force. Number 15. She became part of cultural legacy. Of all the figures who inhabit J.K. Rowling's sprawling wizarding universe, Rita Skeeter stands out as someone readers love to despise, yet cannot easily erase from their imagination. She is introduced in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, sweeping into the narrative with her acid green quick quotes quill and a smile that hides more venom than charm. At first, she appears nothing more than a caricature of tabloid sensationalism, but the deeper one examines her role, the clearer it becomes that Skeeter provides a unique texture to the wizarding world. Her manipulations, her scandals, and her audacity to twist the truth reflect a facet of society that readers immediately recognize, and it is this familiarity that ensures her lasting place in cultural memory. What makes Skeeter unforgettable is her ability to transform even the most mundane detail into something scandalous, an art form that mirrors real-world journalism's darker corners. When she interviewed Harry during the Triwizard Tournament, her quick quotes. Quill scribbled, "A boy like no other, perhaps. But is he really so different from the rest of us? Or does fame carry a hidden curse?" This was not a direct reflection of Harry's words, but her own invention, crafted to entertain readers rather than inform them. In that moment, Skeeter became more than just a character. She became an allegory for the way truth can be shaped, manipulated, and consumed. Readers may have bristled at her dishonesty, but they could not ignore her influence. Her craft is disruptive, but it also brings dimension to the wizarding community, suggesting that even in a world of wands and dragons, newspapers and journalists wield immense power. The Daily Prophet was not merely background decoration, it was a weapon, and Skeeter was one of its sharpest blades. Her articles about Hagrid's giant heritage in Goblet of Fire left the gentle half-giant ostracized and humiliated. For readers, this episode showcased how words could wound as effectively as curses, and how society's prejudices could be inflamed by media narratives. While detestable, Skeeter was undeniably essential in pushing the themes of bias and manipulation into the forefront of the saga. In truth, Rita Skeeter's very presence in the books forces readers to confront uncomfortable questions about the role of journalism in shaping public opinion. The magical world, much like our own, thrives on stories, and those stories often grow more powerful when embroidered with lies. Skeeter was not just reporting, she was creating reality. Her fabricated tales influenced the way people treated Harry, Hagrid, and even Hermione, whom she once painted as a scarlet woman, supposedly toying with both Victor Crumb and Harry. These episodes may have frustrated readers, but they also heightened their investment in the story. By introducing a character so unapologetically shameless, Rowling expanded the depth of her world, reminding us that power is not only about spells but about words. And yet, for all her deception, Skeeter adds a layer of humor and theatricality that enriches the series. Her ostentatious style, described with 3 gold teeth gleaming in the candlelight and thick, painted nails clicking on the table, turned every one of her appearances into a spectacle. It is difficult to forget the absurdity of her scuttling around as an unregistered animagus beetle, eavesdropping on private conversations in search of gossip. This bizarre but memorable detail transforms her from a flat villain into a colorful fixture in the wizarding world's cultural tapestry. Readers may despise her ethics, but they relish the absurd comedy she brings. If we examine her role in the Order of the Phoenix, Skeeter undergoes a subtle transformation, one that makes her more than a mere antagonist. When Hermione cleverly blackmails her into writing the truth about Harry and Voldemort's return for the Quibbler, Skeeter suddenly becomes a tool of justice rather than corruption. For once, her sensationalism is redirected toward exposing lies rather than creating them. It is a powerful narrative twist that suggests Skeeter is not purely evil, but rather opportunistic, bending her quill toward whichever side offers her survival. By showing that even Skeeter could serve truth, Rowling illustrates the complicated interplay between power, coercion, and integrity in journalism. Her ability to evolve, however reluctantly, highlights why she is more than just a nuisance. Skeeter embodies the grey areas of morality. Unlike Voldemort's outright cruelty or Umbridge's authoritarian cruelty, Skeeter's brand of antagonism lies in the slippery terrain of self-interest and ambition. She is not trying to kill Harry nor overthrow the Ministry. She is trying to write headlines that sell. Her goals are not apocalyptic, but they are undeniably human, and it is this ordinariness that makes her stand out. She is a reminder that not all dangers come cloaked in shadows. Some arrive with a smile, a quill, and a knack for twisting words. Her significance extends beyond her immediate actions within the narrative. Skeeter has become a cultural archetype, a symbol of gossip-driven journalism that transcends the pages of the novels. Even outside the wizarding world, her name has become shorthand for invasive reporters and tabloids that care little for truth. Fans frequently invoke her image when criticizing media excesses, proving that Skeeter has left an imprint on popular culture. She has entered that rare space reserved for characters who represent universal truths about society, where her fictional existence resonates with real-world frustrations about news, privacy, and reputation. It is also impossible to deny the narrative richness Skeeter injects into the saga. Without her meddling, many of the story's tensions would lack their sharp edge. Imagine Goblet of Fire without the dramatic fallout of her articles, or Order of the Phoenix without the turning point provided by her exposé in The Quibbler. She may not be noble, but she drives the plot in ways that matter. By holding up a distorted mirror to the heroes, she forces them, and readers, to grapple with how fragile reputations can be. She becomes a catalyst for resilience, teaching Harry and his friends that truth must be defended, not assumed. Number 16, she knew how to use connections. Rita Skeeter has always been one of the most disliked figures in the wizarding world, a reporter who twisted words, chased scandal, and built her reputation on exaggeration. Yet, if one pauses and looks carefully, there is something almost admirable in her ability to use connections. She was not only a gossip columnist for the Daily Prophet, but also a woman who wove herself into the very fabric of wizarding society. Unlike most witches and wizards who lived comfortably hidden in their own circles, Rita knew everyone: politicians, auras, schoolchildren, and even those ostracized by society. This network of contacts gave her an edge that no amount of magic could replace. She may have been disliked, but she could never be ignored, and that in itself is a form of power that Harry Potter, surprisingly, helped us recognize. Consider the Triwizard Tournament in Goblet of Fire, when Rita swooped down on Hogwarts like a hawk circling prey. She was not content with official announcements or carefully filtered statements from the judges. She found ways to slip into conversations with students, professors, and ministry officials. She cornered Harry in broom cupboards, intercepted Hagrid at odd hours, and even pried into the personal lives of Fleur Delacour and Victor Crumb. When she published Harry Potter's Secret Heartache, she was not simply fabricating, she was exploiting whispers she had already collected from her intricate web of informants. The article read, "Harry Potter, champion of Hogwarts, is a lonely, neglected boy who craves a shoulder to cry on." It was cruel and manipulative, yet it reflected her mastery at taking scraps of gossip and binding them together into something the wizarding world could not stop talking about. Her ties to the Ministry of Magic were perhaps her strongest weapon, Cornelius Fudge, in particular, seemed unable to resist giving her access, whether intentionally or through his careless desire for positive press. During the early stages of Voldemort's return, when Dumbledore's warnings were dismissed, Rita continued to churn out Ministry-approved narratives that ridiculed Harry and his supporters. She was part of the machinery that suppressed the truth, but she was also the only journalist capable of broadcasting ideas to every corner of the wizarding world within days. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry read her words used as weapons against him. "He is disturbed, possibly dangerous," the Daily Prophet reported. Skeeter might have been despised, but her network meant that her pen, dipped in poison, carried the weight of law and authority. What makes Skeeter fascinating is not simply that she wrote lies, but that she knew how to make them believable. She cultivated sources, maintained favors, and stored information like a dragon hoards gold. When Hermione Granger trapped her in her unregistered animagus form at the end of Goblet of Fire, the girl did not merely catch a liar, she caught the one person who had managed to dig into every secret at Hogwarts. Rita knew about Hagrid's half-giant heritage before even many of his colleagues spoke of it openly. She found out about Ludo Bagman's gambling debts. She even sniffed around the private lives of Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape, something that few dared attempt. These were not the discoveries of a woman with idle curiosity, but of one with cultivated channels of information. Even when silenced, she remained dangerous because of what she already knew. If one compares her to other journalists of her time, Skeeter's skill becomes clearer. The wizarding world had very few reporters of note, most content to reprint ministry statements or publish notices about cauldron regulations. Skeeter, in contrast, made herself essential by being both feared and followed. Her columns might enrage people, but they also sold papers. Wizards who claimed to despise her still read her words. That paradox, the hated voice that cannot be shut out, was achieved through her ability to bind herself to every layer of wizarding society. Harry, who spent much of his adolescence battling her falsehoods, inadvertently taught readers to see that her influence came not from magic or truth, but from relationships she had nurtured over years. An example that underscores her peculiar strength lies in the events following the Quidditch World Cup. Chaos erupted when Death Eaters terrorized Muggles, and the Dark Mark lit up the sky. In the confusion, many journalists waited for official explanations. Rita did not. She immediately leaned on her contacts within the Department of Magical Games and Sports and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Her swift publication, though slanted, framed the narrative before others could catch up. "Scenes of terror at the Quidditch World Cup," her article blared, complete with insinuations about foreign wizards and incompetent security. This speed was not due to her quill alone. It was the result of having cultivated informants who slipped her details while others were still scrambling to assemble the facts. Even Harry, who despised Skeeter, was forced to acknowledge her reach when he and Dumbledore needed her in Order of the Phoenix. With the Ministry silencing dissent, the only way Harry's account of Voldemort's return could spread was through the very woman who had once tried to destroy him. Hermione, clever as ever, struck a deal with Skeeter: publish the truth in the Quibbler, or risk exposure as an unregistered animagus. The irony was brutal. Skeeter's own survival forced her to act, but the truth could only spread because of her reputation and her network. "It's the only way," Hermione insisted. And indeed, once the article, "Harry Potter, the Truth at Last," appeared, it was Skeeter's name that made people read it. Without her, Harry's voice would have been lost in the Ministry's shadow. That moment reveals something paradoxical. Rita Skeeter, master of manipulation, could also serve as a tool for justice precisely because of the influence she had amassed. It was not integrity that gave her reach, but connections. She knew how to feed rumors into stories and how to make those stories impossible to ignore. When Harry sat in the Gryffindor common room, watching as students passed around the Quibbler, he realized the double-edged nature of her gift. She could damage reputations, but she could also break the ministry's monopoly on truth. This is why, for a fleeting moment, she became an ally. Rather than an enemy, it is a lesson in the strange morality of influence. Sometimes the worst people hold the tools most necessary for survival. It is also worth noting how Skeeter managed her relationships with ordinary witches and wizards, not just the powerful. In Diagon Alley, she could extract gossip from shopkeepers, clerks, and passers-by with alarming ease. She had the kind of presence that drew out secrets, whether willingly or under pressure. When she wrote about Harry's private training sessions with Albus Dumbledore, it was not because she invented the idea from thin air. Someone had whispered it, perhaps a student, perhaps a shop assistant, who overheard. Skeeter was always listening. She made herself a hub in a web of whispers, proof that true influence is not about commanding respect, but about cultivating access to information others overlook. Her enemies often underestimated this power. Hermione believed silencing Skeeter for a year would end her menace, but when she returned in Half-Blood Prince, she did so with sharper claws. Her biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, showed how she could twist historical records, personal letters, and obscure testimonies into a narrative that even Harry found unsettling. She quoted Bathilda Bagshot, exploited Dumbledore's family tragedies, and revived long-buried scandals. Skeeter's talent lay not in accuracy, but in the fact that she always knew whom to approach, where to dig, and how to stitch fragments into a compelling story. Her words cut deeply because they were rooted in connections no one else had thought to exploit. This makes Harry's relationship with Skeeter especially ironic. He despised her methods, yet his story was inextricably tied to her pen. She shaped public perception of him during the tournament, mocked him during his trials, and finally gave him a voice when the ministry tried to silence him. Her network made her both a villain and a reluctant ally. Harry showed us that to understand Rita is to recognize the uncomfortable truth that influence often belongs not to the virtuous, but to those who manage relationships with relentless precision. One cannot ignore the artistry in how Skeeter leveraged favors. She knew when to flatter, when to threaten, and when to simply linger until someone slipped. It was not spells that brought her stories, but persistence and manipulation of human nature. She used her quill as a stage, but her true magic was in weaving people into her performance. Wizards might have loathed her, but many secretly respected the audacity it took to outmaneuver both the ministry and Dumbledore's circle. Even as she became infamous, she demonstrated that knowing the right people at the right time could rival the strongest wand. It is tempting to dismiss her entirely as a parasite on the wizarding world, but Harry's experiences caution against such simplicity. Rita Skeeter embodies the uncomfortable reality that networks, not just talent or honesty, shape influence. She was a mirror held up to the wizarding community, showing how easily secrets could be twisted and how eagerly people consumed them. Through Harry's battles with her, readers learned to see that even disliked figures can possess skills worth studying. Her connections were not merely gossip, they were her arsenal, and they made her indispensable in moments when the truth desperately needed a voice. In the end, Rita Skeeter's legacy is not one of moral triumph, but of strategic brilliance. She reminds us that relationships, even toxic ones, hold immense power in shaping narratives. Harry Potter, the boy who hated her most, inadvertently revealed why she mattered, because when everyone else stayed silent, Rita always had someone to call, someone to whisper, someone to feed her words. And in a world where information was as dangerous as curses, that made her unforgettable. Number 17. She had rare charisma. Rita Skeeter has always been an object of scorn in the wizarding world, her reputation cemented by gossip columns and sensational headlines. Yet beneath the sneering descriptions and twisted truths, there exists something that few admit. She possessed a rare charisma. This charisma was not the warm, inviting glow of a kind mentor, nor the noble aura of a hero, but the sharp and glittering charm of someone who knew how to control the room. In a world where giants, auras, and legendary professors walked the streets, Rita still found ways to make her presence undeniable. Her bright robes, her bejeweled glasses, and her deliberately theatrical manner drew every eye, and once attention was captured, she wielded it like a wand. Her coverage of the Tri-Wizard tournament is perhaps the best illustration of her peculiar magnetism. When Harry Potter's name came from the Goblet of Fire, the wizarding world was in shock. Ministry officials muttered in confusion, students gossiped in corridors, and even Dumbledore seemed unsettled. It was Rita who swooped in, not as a passive observer, but as a force who seized the narrative. She cornered Harry, her quick quotes quill, scribbling away as she crafted lines like, "Harry Potter's eyes filled with the mist of tears as he spoke of his tragic past." The sentence was untrue, exaggerated to the point of parody, yet it spread quickly because it was memorable, dramatic, and irresistible. That was Rita's talent, to take ordinary words and bend them into something people could not stop reading. The Daily Prophet, often dull with its cautious official reports, suddenly came alive when Rita's byline appeared. Wizards who would never admit to enjoying gossip still found themselves lingering over her pieces, curious about what exclusive scoop she might reveal next. Even Hermione, who despised her methods, had to acknowledge the pull of Skeeter's prose, calling it utter rubbish, yet reading it all the same. The charisma was embedded not only in her voice but also in her pen. She shaped perception and commanded readers' emotions, regardless of whether they agreed with her conclusions. That power is the essence of charisma, the ability to influence others without needing their consent. Consider the Yule Ball, an evening already heavy with elegance and intrigue. While Fleur Delacour shimmered in silver and Victor Crumb loomed in stoic grandeur, Rita slid through the crowd with a predator's instinct. She did not come to dance or admire the ice sculptures, she came to hunt for stories. Her method was insidious but effective, slipping questions, feigning sympathy, pressing details, until her subjects revealed more than they intended. The way she captivated young students like Harry and Cedric Diggory was unsettling, yet it demonstrated the peculiar magnetism she carried. "So tragic, so brave," she would coo, and her victims, despite themselves, often leaned into her words. Even Severus Snape, notoriously cold and dismissive, treated her with a guarded edge, proving that she was a figure people could not ignore. Charisma is not always kind. In fact, Rita's brand of charisma was sharp-edged and demanding, the kind that provoked reactions even when people wished to remain neutral. In the pages of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, her articles twisted events into narratives that lingered long after the ink dried. Harry found himself labeled disturbed and dangerous, not because the facts supported such a claim, but because Rita had written it with such conviction. That conviction was her weapon. People believed her, not because she was honest, but because she radiated the confidence of someone who acted as though she already knew the truth. In the wizarding world, where uncertainty and rumor often spread faster than spells, this confidence was intoxicating. Her presence during the ministry trials of the Death Eaters further revealed the depth of her influence. While the Wizengamot focused on evidence and testimony, Rita's coverage reached the kitchens, the shops, and the hearths of wizarding families across Britain. Readers might forget the dry legal details, but they remembered Rita's cutting phrases and vivid descriptions. She could transform dull bureaucracy into a stage play, ensuring that her subjects, whether innocent or guilty, were remembered in a way she dictated. That again was charisma, forcing memory to attach to her version of events, making it nearly impossible for the public to disentangle fact from performance. It is telling that Dumbledore himself chose not to waste time trying to silence her. He knew well that her power came not only from the prophet's pages, but from her uncanny ability to stir conversation. even when he dismissed her reports, saying, "You should not believe a word of it." Students and staff alike could not resist repeating her latest lines. Dumbledore understood the futility of trying to counteract someone whose weapon was attention itself. In a way, Rita resembled a spell, disruptive, hard to resist, and deeply woven into the culture of wizarding communication. One of the most striking demonstrations of her charisma lies in her animagus secret. Transforming into a beetle to spy on her targets was a violation of trust and law, yet it shows the lengths she would go to ensure her narrative dominance. Few journalists in the wizarding world would dare such risks, and yet her revelations, though often slanted, always seemed to capture something that stuck. Her exposé on Hagrid, painting him as a half-breed with dangerous instincts, was cruel and unjust. Still, many whispered about it long afterward, proof that Rita's words burrowed into public consciousness. If she lacked charisma, her articles would have been forgotten. Instead, they left wounds that required years to heal. In contrast, consider other reporters of the prophet whose names barely linger in memory. They reported facts with precision but lacked the spark to grip the imagination. Rita's stories may have been cruel or exaggerated, but they were unforgettable. Even Hermione's clever scheme to blackmail her into silence only confirmed this truth. Why bother imprisoning her in a jar if she were harmless? Hermione recognized that Rita's influence was too dangerous to be left unchecked. Ironically, this battle of wills underscored Skeeter's strange charm. She mattered enough to be contained, while others were simply ignored. The quote that perhaps best reflects her power comes during Harry's uncomfortable interview for her biography of Dumbledore in the Deathly Hallows. Harry protests, claiming that she twisted the truth. Rita replies with biting amusement, "The prophet exists to sell itself, dear boy." This simple statement demonstrates her understanding of charisma, not as truth, but as impact. She did not need her stories to be factual. She needed them to be irresistible. That ruthless clarity of purpose set her apart from almost everyone else in the wizarding world. It is worth noting that charisma often thrives in opposition. Harry hated her, Hermione despised her, Ron mocked her, yet each of them was, in some way, affected by her presence. Harry, forced into defensive silence, gave her the dramatic image of a reluctant hero. Hermione, fueled by moral outrage, became entangled in a personal battle with her. Ron, half amused and half annoyed, quoted her lines with a kind of grim fascination. Skeeter thrived precisely because even her enemies could not look away. Charisma demands engagement, and Rita knew how to secure it. One must ask, what is more dangerous, a villain ignored or a villain remembered? Rita was never a Death Eater, never a dark sorcerer, never a threat in combat, yet she lingered in memory as strongly as those who carried wands steeped in blood. That lingering presence is testament to her unique charm. Wizards could laugh at her outlandish clothes, ridicule her venomous prose, even despise her outright, yet the moment her name appeared on a page, they stopped to read. The magnetism of her voice drew them in whether they wanted it or not. In many ways, Rita Skeeter was a mirror of wizarding society. She reflected its hunger for stories, its delight in scandal, and its fear of half-truths. Her charisma thrived because it matched the audience's own secret desires to be shocked, entertained, and persuaded. She could not have succeeded without readers who wanted what she offered. This dynamic explains why she never faded even after Hermione exposed her illegal animagus form. A society that craves drama will always find a stage for someone like Rita. Ultimately, Rita Skeeter was proof that charisma is not inherently good or bad. It is a force, much like magic itself, shaped by the one who wields it. She used hers to twist, to exaggerate, and to wound. Yet the fact remains, she had it. In a world overflowing with legends, Harry, Dumbledore, Voldemort, Rita Skeeter carved her place not with spells, but with words and presence. Her charisma was undeniable, and for that reason alone, Perhaps she deserves a sliver of warmth from us, even if begrudgingly. Number 18, she was braver than she seemed. Of all the controversial figures in the Harry Potter world, few are as despised as Rita Skeeter. She is remembered as a gossip-driven journalist, someone who twisted words and manipulated situations for personal gain. Yet, hidden beneath her gaudy green quills and acid green robes is a quality not often credited to her: courage. Rita was not just writing from the safety of her office. She was in the middle of danger, deliberately stepping into places where few witches or wizards dared to linger. Her animagus form as a beetle was not simply a trick of deception, but also a leap into peril, showing that she had the nerve to put herself at risk in pursuit of information. She might not embody the noble bravery of Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom, but there is an argument to be made that her willingness to face danger in her own questionable way is reason enough to regard her with a touch more warmth. The clearest example of this bravery comes during the Triwizard Tournament. Rita did not limit herself to covering the event from the safety of the stands. She transformed into her beetle form and placed herself directly inside restricted areas. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we see the consequences of her invasive reporting when she manages to overhear private conversations between Harry and Hagrid. The text tells us Rita Skeeter had been buzzing along the edge of the forest, listening in where she had no right to be. This might sound simply sneaky, but think of the setting: the forbidden forest, home to centaurs, acromantulas, and all manner of magical dangers. Even the professors advised students to avoid going deep inside. Yet Rita entered willingly, small and vulnerable, betting her life on her ability to stay unnoticed. No protective charms guarded her in beetle form, and the risk of being crushed underfoot or eaten by a creature was always present. That she chose to do so reveals a streak of audacity that most reporters, wizard or muggle, would never dare. Another striking moment comes at the Ministry of Magic. Rita did not merely linger in public corridors. She ventured into private offices, hovering unseen during tense political discussions. In The Goblet of Fire, Hermione deduces Rita's secret and explains she's an unregistered animagus. She's been buzzing about as a beetle, listening in wherever she can. This is not just an exposé of her illegal behavior, but also proof of the environment she chose to infiltrate. The Ministry was not a safe playground for casual eavesdropping. With wards, protective enchantments, and vigilant auras, the risk of being caught was significant. If discovered, her career would have ended, and she could have faced imprisonment in Azkaban for being an unregistered animagus. That she continually took this risk, time and time again, paints her not only as reckless but undeniably bold. She went where danger and punishment hovered like shadows and did not flinch. Rita Skeeter's boldness becomes even clearer when compared to others in the wizarding world. Consider how many witches and wizards avoided even speaking Voldemort's name. Many clung to silence, terrified of association or consequence, yet Rita was fearless in publishing controversial articles that stirred unrest. True, her motivation was fame and profit, but courage is not diminished by questionable intent. Her pen dared to scratch truths and lies about Albus Dumbledore, Harry Potter, and even the Ministry itself. She made enemies on every side, a dangerous act in a community where grudges could be deadly. Unlike the Daily Prophet's cautious editors, she was willing to push boundaries. That is not the behavior of someone timid or safe. It is the mark of someone who thrived in fire. One might argue that Rita's courage was cloaked in self-interest, but even so, her actions deserve recognition. When she wrote her scandalous article about Hagrid's parentage, she did more than humiliate a beloved teacher. She risked enraging Dumbledore himself, the most powerful wizard of the age. Skeeter must have known the backlash that awaited her, yet she pressed her quill to parchment without hesitation. "Half-giant! Dumbledore's protection!" her article sneered, but beneath the cruelty was a journalist who had no fear of confronting icons. She did not tremble before authority, she mocked it in print, knowing full well that retribution could come swiftly. In this, she mirrored Harry himself, who constantly defied authority for his own reasons. Their causes were worlds apart, but their courage in confrontation bore resemblance. Her transformation into a beetle, too, requires acknowledgement of raw nerve. Becoming so small, so fragile, and entering scenes of chaos was like stepping unarmed into a battlefield. During the Triwizard Tournament's second task, Rita lurked near the lake, waiting for scandal. She positioned herself where she could have been trampled by panicked spectators or discovered by aurors monitoring the area. One careless boot could have crushed her. This choice cannot be written off as mere nosiness. It was a gamble of her life, undertaken repeatedly. The willingness to embrace that kind of risk is rare. Harry faced dragons, true, but he did so with the support of his peers and the approval of the rules. Rita faced the dragon of anonymity, fully aware that her exposure would bring disgrace and punishment. To call her a coward after this is to miss the essence of what courage can look like. Moreover, her animagus transformation was unregistered, which added another layer of risk. The Ministry kept strict control over such magic because of the potential for abuse. If caught, she would not simply face professional embarrassment. The law was clear and punishment could be severe. She knew this, and still she buzzed into forbidden places. Compare her with Peter Pettigrew, another animagus who used his form to escape capture. Pettigrew acted out of fear and survival. Rita acted out of ambition and curiosity. One shrank to save his life, the other shrank to chase danger. Between the two, one must admit that Rita's choice was the braver one, even if misguided. It is worth pausing on how much physical vulnerability was involved. A beetle is defenseless, without a wand, without speech. She was exposed to 1,000 threats. Spiders could eat her. A flick of a wand could incinerate her. Even a simple breeze could throw her into peril. Yet she trusted herself to survive in this form, relying only on her wits. This level of trust in her own resilience is not born of timidity. It is the mindset of someone who thrives on risk. Her survival was not guaranteed, but she chose it anyway. Another example comes later in The Order of the Phoenix, when Hermione blackmails Rita into writing the true story of Voldemort's return for the Quibbler. Though forced, Rita still accepted the task, knowing it would provoke wrath from the Ministry and Voldemort's followers alike. She could have refused, claiming professional ruin, but she penned the piece regardless. In this act, Skeeter displayed a curious form of bravery once more. She lent her voice to a story no one else dared to print. True, she was manipulated into it, but courage can still exist under duress. She signed her name on an article that challenged the most dangerous wizard alive. That choice alone reveals that her quill, however poisonous, could also cut fearlessly against the grain. What makes Rita so fascinating is the contrast between her cowardice in character and her courage in action. She was not morally brave. She did not stand for justice or truth. Yet her willingness to put herself in mortal danger repeatedly and with full awareness speaks volumes. She was selfish, greedy, and intrusive, but she was not faint-hearted. In her own flawed way, she mirrored the Gryffindor spirit, though she would never be admitted to that house. Her brand of courage was twisted, but courage it remained. We must also recall that Rita was a woman working in a highly politicized, male-dominated sphere. To carve her name into the Daily Prophet, she had to be loud, aggressive, and daring. She was not a witch content with safety or silence. Her voice was sharp, her methods illegal, her risks constant. Whatever else one might accuse her of, she was not forgettable. She embodied the dangerous glamour of a journalist who risked everything for the next headline. Her bravery was not noble, but it was undeniable. It is easy to despise Rita Skeeter for her cruelty, but it is harder to ignore her strength. Bravery does not always wear the face of righteousness. Sometimes it hides behind green spectacles and a quick quotes quill. Sometimes it buzzes unnoticed in the air, risking everything for a scrap of overheard truth. And perhaps when one thinks of Rita this way, it becomes a little easier to soften toward her. Harry himself, who saw her at her worst, might one day admit that even Skeeter possessed the courage to step where few dared tread. Number 19, she reflected the flaws of the system. Rita Skeeter was never meant to be loved, and perhaps that is exactly why she deserves a second look. Her character was constructed from exaggeration and sharpness, her quill dripping with venom, her words slicing reputations to pieces. Yet behind that green, quick quotes, quill lurked a reflection not of her alone, but of the entire wizarding society. To hate her was convenient, to dismiss her as an opportunistic gossip felt justified, but the uncomfortable truth is that Rita only gave the public what it craved: spectacle, scandal, and a sense of moral superiority over the fallen. Consider the moment in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. When Rita twists Harry's words after the Tri-Wizard Tournament press conference. She writes that Harry is a tragic boy tormented by nightmares, exaggerating details to stir pity and gossip. The public devours it. The Daily Prophet places her articles in the spotlight because readers cannot resist the lure of exaggerated tragedy. One must ask, then, was the problem Rita's methods, or was it the society that hungrily consumed them? In that sense, she was not the disease, but the symptom. Her reporting on Hermione Granger demonstrates this tension even more clearly. In the same book, Rita publishes the infamous article suggesting Hermione has ensnared both Harry Potter and Victor Crumb. Harry Potter's secret heartache turned a brilliant young witch into a caricature of female ambition, reducing her to a manipulator of hearts. Outrage spread, but not because readers wanted truth, because they enjoyed the scandal. Hermione herself fumed that Skeeter was a horrible woman, yet the letters she received accusing her of playing with famous boys' affections reveal how willingly the wizarding community absorbed the narrative. Rita simply exploited what people were already ready to believe. This mirrors the larger failures of the Ministry of Magic. Cornelius Fudge's denial of Voldemort's return thrived on controlling the press, and Skeeter was one of the gears in this machine. Yet when examined closely, her willingness to bend truth only amplified what the government already sought to enforce. Fudge leaned on the prophet to silence dissenting voices, but it was Skeeter's flair for manipulation that kept the narrative alive. Her gift was not invention, but magnification, transforming whispers into headlines. She was ruthless, yes, but she was also the perfect mirror of a society desperate to avoid responsibility. Even Dumbledore, who rarely spoke of Skeeter except with irritation, understood that she represented a structural weakness in wizarding culture. The fact that she thrived so easily in the pages of the prophet speaks volumes about the readership. A free press exists only as long as its readers demand integrity. Instead, the wizarding world demanded drama. In that sense, Skeeter merely catered to a broken appetite, like a baker selling sweets to those who refuse to eat bread. If we despise her for doing so, perhaps we despise ourselves even more for enjoying the feast. Her animagus ability provides another symbolic layer. The beetle that scurried into private corners represents more than her personal sneakiness. It reflects society's obsession with hidden truths, with uncovering secrets not meant for public consumption. The readers of the prophet did not question how she obtained such scandalous detail. They only cared that she produced it. The beetle, crawling unnoticed, is both Rita's weapon and society's craving. She transformed eavesdropping into a business, and every reader who devoured her columns encouraged her to keep crawling. One of her sharpest moments of exposure came with Albus Dumbledore's obituary in The Deathly Hallows. The chapter, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, is Rita at her most destructive and yet most necessary. She revealed the young Dumbledore's friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, hinting at dark ambitions and unspoken failures. Harry's fury was immediate. He felt betrayed by this invasion of Dumbledore's privacy. And yet, as readers, we must admit that Skeeter forced Harry, and us, to confront the idea that heroes are flawed, that even the greatest wizard of his age carried shameful secrets. This was no fabrication. She rooted her work in fact, if selectively told. Her work reflected society's discomfort with imperfection, its inability to accept that leaders are both light and shadow. Harry's own reaction is telling. He does not want to believe Skeeter, but the doubts she plants linger. He begins to question whether Dumbledore truly trusted him, whether his mentor had been as noble as legend suggested. These questions cause pain, but they also foster growth. By forcing Harry to reckon with Dumbledore as a flawed man rather than a saint, Skeeter ironically helps him mature into the leader who can finish the battle against Voldemort. If we acknowledge this, then perhaps Skeeter's role was not simply destructive. She functioned as the abrasive force that stripped away illusion. One cannot overlook her style either. The quick quotes Quill does not write in facts, but in heightened impressions. It describes Harry's thin, misty eyes and portrays him as fragile, always adding drama where none exists. This exaggeration is grotesque, but it also mirrors the wizarding world's own theatrical culture. From grandiose duels to pompous ministry events, the society loves performance. Rita simply turned life itself into performance on paper. Her quill was not corrupt in isolation, it was the stage, the actors, and the audience that gave it power. Why then is she despised more than others who engaged in similar manipulations? Fudge used denial as a weapon, Umbridge used propaganda with cruelty. Xenophilius Lovegood, in his own eccentric way, mixed truth and invention in The Quibbler. But Skeeter alone became a figure of ridicule and hatred. Perhaps this is because she was a woman, unapologetic and ambitious, in a field dominated by male authority figures. She wielded her pen with a shamelessness that society could not tolerate. To condemn her was easier than admitting the system had given her space to thrive. When Hermione finally blackmails Rita with the secret of her unregistered animagus form, it feels like justice. Yet the justice rings hollow. Hermione, usually the champion of rules, uses blackmail and coercion, bending morality to achieve silence. Why? Because silencing Skeeter feels easier than reforming the entire corrupt media system. This moment exposes the greater truth. Skeeter was not the enemy, but the scapegoat. If the prophet demanded integrity, Rita would have been forced to adapt. Instead, Hermione must control her personally, because society at large had no will to change. Even Viktor Krum's portrayal reveals something profound. Rita paints him as the brooding foreign lover, exotic and dangerous, preying on young Hermione's affections. Readers love the stereotype, and suddenly Krum becomes more than a champion. He becomes tabloid fodder. This reflects the wizarding world's tendency toward prejudice, quick to define others by nationality, blood status, or rumor. Rita did not invent that prejudice. She exposed it, magnified it, and profited from it. In hating her, perhaps readers tried to bury their own biases. The true genius of Rita Skeeter lies in how she blurred the line between truth and fiction. She rarely invented stories whole cloth. She twisted, exaggerated, and framed facts in ways that ignited emotion. In this, she resembled Voldemort's power, not in cruelty, but in manipulation. Voldemort ruled by exploiting fear. Skeeter ruled by exploiting fascination. Both thrived because the wizarding world allowed them to. To hate her is to ignore the deeper truth that she was always a mirror. In the end, perhaps Harry Potter himself teaches us how to view Rita Skeeter with nuance. He despised her interference, her lies, her cruelty. But by the end of his journey, Harry had faced far greater manipulations and betrayals. Skeeter was irritating, but she was also trivial compared to the corruption of the Ministry, the cruelty of Umbridge, or the lies Voldemort spread. She was not the storm. She was the weather vane, spinning wildly, but always showing the direction of the wind. She revealed the flaws in wizarding society, whether people wanted to admit it or not. So, if readers find themselves despising her, perhaps it is because she did her job too well. She made visible what was easier left unseen. She was the beetle crawling through the cracks of a world that preferred its illusions intact, and in that light, to hate her completely is to hate the reflection she held up to us all. Number 20. She brought variety into the plot. Of all the characters who crossed Harry Potter's path, few divided readers as sharply as Rita Skeeter. With her acid green quill and her unshakable sense of self-importance, she injected a kind of theatrical chaos into the story that few others could. Her role was never about heroism or sacrifice, it was about distortion, scandal, and disruption. Yet paradoxically, those very qualities gave the world of Harry Potter a sharper edge. Without her, the narrative would have lacked one of its most unusual flavors, the unsettling mix of humor and frustration that turned every encounter with her into a memorable event. Her first true moment in the spotlight came during the Triwizard Tournament in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. When she cornered Harry inside a broom cupboard, shoving her enchanted quill into his face, the absurdity of the situation contrasted with the otherwise tense atmosphere of the tournament. Readers had followed Harry's fear and uncertainty as he faced dragons and mermaids, but Rita introduced a different kind of menace, a manipulative journalist who twisted truth into caricature. Harry Potter's Secret Heartache was her headline, and it was as comical as it was infuriating. The article made Harry appear pitiful and unstable, and for readers it was a reminder that battles in this world were not only fought with wands, but also with words. There is something unsettlingly human about her flaws. Characters like Voldemort or Dolores Umbridge embodied pure cruelty or tyranny, but Rita was a different type of antagonist. She was not evil for the sake of destruction. She thrived on sensationalism and gossip. In that way, she brought the wizarding world closer to the reader's own. Who has not encountered a tabloid article so absurdly twisted that it is both laughable and maddening? Rowling knew what she was doing by placing Skeeter in the center of Hogwarts gossip. She made the magical world mirror our own, showing that even wizards were not immune to the destructive power of rumor. One cannot forget how she targeted Hermione Granger. During the tournament, Rita painted her as a manipulative girl caught in a love triangle with Harry and Victor Crumb. Harry's Secret Heartache portrayed Hermione as someone who had broken Harry's heart and toyed with Victor's affection. For Hermione, who prided herself on logic and hard work, this slander was unbearable. Yet for the narrative, it added texture. Suddenly, Hermione was not only battling spells or exams, but also the distortion of her public image. Rita forced her to fight on an unexpected front, showing readers that reputation can be as vulnerable as flesh and bone. Her quill itself became a character in its own right. Described as acid green and enchanted to exaggerate and embellish, it captured the essence of Skeeter's work. Whenever it appeared, readers knew chaos was coming. The presence of that quill in Harry's world added a surreal humor to tense moments, cutting through otherwise dark passages with absurdity. The quill represented everything irritating about Skeeter, yet also everything colorful she contributed to the story. The way Dumbledore handled her also revealed another layer of her usefulness. At the Yule Ball, when Rita attempted to dig into Hagrid's half-giant heritage, Dumbledore calmly warned her about the dangers of her writing, reminding her that gossip had consequences. It was a rare moment when readers saw Dumbledore confront someone not with spells or stern words, but with a subtle, almost paternal scolding. Rita, in turn, revealed how even someone as powerful as Dumbledore had to contend with the nuisance of public perception. Her presence expanded the scope of the story, showing that even leaders could not escape the reach of the press. Skeeter also enriched the world of Harry Potter through humor. She was exasperating, but she was never entirely joyless. Her absurdities provided comic relief in moments when the narrative leaned too heavily into darkness, Consider the way she intruded on the champions' interview sessions, scribbling wildly inaccurate quotes and interrupting with ridiculous questions. The humor came not only from her words but also from the reactions of those around her. Hermione's indignation, Harry's disbelief, even Victor Crumb's visible irritation. In those moments, she was the spark that lit up the tension with farcical energy. Her later reappearance in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix reinforced her role as a trickster figure. Hermione discovered her secret. Rita was an unregistered animagus who could transform into a beetle. This revelation did not just expose Rita's hypocrisy, it gave Hermione the upper hand. The moment was satisfying not only because Rita was finally caught, but also because it proved how essential her interference had been. Without Skeeter, Hermione would never have had the chance to experience the thrill of holding power over someone so manipulative. It was poetic justice, and it kept readers invested. By the time Skeeter reappeared in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, with her scandalous biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, her role had transformed from comic nuisance to sinister manipulator. Her book was filled with half-truths, exaggerations, and malicious speculation about Dumbledore's youth and his relationship with Gellert Grindelwald. Here, Skeeter forced readers to reconsider their understanding of Dumbledore. Was the great wizard as flawless as he seemed? Her accusations created cracks in the perfect image of the headmaster, and through those cracks emerged a more human, complex Dumbledore. Even in her malice, Rita made the story deeper, pushing readers to confront uncomfortable truths. The balance Skeeter brought to the series was subtle but vital. On one side were towering forces of darkness, Death Eaters, Dementors, Voldemort. On the other side were Harry's allies, Dumbledore, the Order, his friends. Between them stood Rita Skeeter, not a villain in the traditional sense, but a reminder that life's battles are rarely simple. The chaos she brought was irritating, sometimes laughable, sometimes cruel, but it was necessary. It reminded readers that even in a world of magic, everyday corruption and media manipulation had their place. Her impact on Harry himself should not be underestimated. Harry despised her, but through her he learned how dangerous public perception could be. Her articles shaped how the wizarding community saw him, transforming him from a boy who survived into a troubled child star, from a hero into a fraud, depending on her pen. This lesson, that truth is fragile and reputation can be destroyed in an instant, was one of the many hard truths Harry had to face on his path to maturity. Without Skeeter, his understanding of the world would have been flatter, less nuanced. Many ways, Rita embodied the theme of misinformation, which runs like a shadow throughout the books. Just as Voldemort twisted ideology to rally followers, Rita twisted facts to sell stories. Both thrived on fear, exaggeration, and manipulation. Yet Skeeter's version was smaller, more ridiculous, more human. She was a foil that reflected the same mechanisms of deception, but on a scale that readers could laugh at, even as they recognized its danger. Rowling's genius was in weaving Skeeter into the fabric of the story so that she never felt unnecessary. When the tournament became too predictable, Rita appeared. When Harry's fame seemed secure, she undermined it. When Dumbledore's reputation seemed untouchable, she attacked it. Each time, her interference shook the stability of the narrative, forcing both characters and readers to question what they thought they knew. This unpredictability kept the story vibrant, breaking the monotony of straightforward heroism. Perhaps that is why, despite all her cruelty, readers cannot entirely hate her. She was frustrating, yes, but she was also entertaining. She was the character readers loved to loathe, and in that sense, she became indispensable. Without Rita Skeeter, the wizarding world would have been less chaotic, less irritating, but also less alive. She represented the messy, absurd, and very human flaws that made Rowling's world feel real. Through her, the books gained a balance of light and shadow, humor and darkness, irritation and delight. and for that reason she remains one of the most strangely lovable figures in the entire saga. Number 21, she had incredible persistence. Rita Skeeter is often painted as one of the least likable figures in the wizarding world, a journalist whose quill drips more venom than ink. Yet it is precisely this quality that makes her unforgettable. When we step back from the immediate irritation she causes to characters like Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, or even Dumbledore, we notice something extraordinary in her relentless pursuit of a story. Rita was never someone who surrendered to obstacles. If the ministry tried to silence her, she found another way. If a headmaster barred her from Hogwarts, she invented excuses to sneak in. The truth, or at least her version of it, was going to be written no matter the cost. Such persistence, while maddening in its misuse, is also undeniably admirable. Her coverage during the Triwizard Tournament provides a perfect illustration. Hogwarts was meant to be a safe bubble, closed off from meddling outsiders, yet Rita Skeeter managed to infiltrate the castle grounds, her quick quotes, quill, scribbling away even as Professor McGonagall fumed. She wrote about Harry's supposed tragic past and disturbed state of mind, crafting an image of the boy who lived as a reckless attention-seeker. Harry despised it, Hermione was outraged, and readers were fed a twisted version of events. Still, what shines through is that Rita succeeded where many others would have given up. Access was denied, information was guarded, but she clawed through barriers to get her story. Harry Potter's Secret Heartache, she titled one article, capturing the attention of the wizarding public with her dramatic flair. Wrong as she was, her determination could not be ignored. Rita's willingness to exploit her animagus form only underscores her persistence. Few witches or wizards would dare break the law so boldly, but Rita became an unregistered beetle in order to sneak into conversations and corners that were barred to her. When she wanted to overhear discussions between Harry, Ron, and Hermione, she did not hesitate to risk Azkaban-level consequences. Her articles may have been twisted, but her investigative instincts were razor-sharp. This is not to say that breaking the law makes her virtuous, but the lengths she went to highlight just how unshakable her drive was. For readers, it creates a strange sense of respect. If one puts aside her moral failings, here was a woman who simply would not be stopped. The scene where Rita sneaks into the Hogwarts library as a beetle captures this beautifully. Hermione later uncovers the truth, realizing that the insect on the window was more than it seemed. That act of subterfuge was born of pure determination. Rita wanted her scoop, and she found a method to achieve it. One might argue that this was invasive and wrong, yet in a world where others were too timid to question authority, her audacity stood out. The wizarding world had long been governed by whispers and unspoken secrets. Rita shattered that silence, even if what she printed was warped. That requires courage, however misplaced. It is easy to hate her when she mocks Hermione by suggesting a love triangle with Victor Crumb. Harry Potter's Secret Heartache was not journalism, it was character assassination. Still, it also demonstrated her refusal to accept boundaries. No young witch, no powerful headmaster, no respected professor could intimidate her into silence. She thrived on confrontation, which, while toxic in execution, reveals a kind of professional ferocity rarely matched in the series. Many journalists in the wizarding world were content to echo ministry lines or recycle safe stories. Rita, by contrast, always clawed at the forbidden, the hidden, and the personal. One of the most compelling examples of her tenacity comes much later, when she publishes her biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. The backlash was immediate and intense. Wizards across Britain condemned her as a vulture feeding off a man's death, yet it must be admitted that she unearthed facts about Dumbledore's youth that no one else dared touch. She delved into his relationship with Gellert Grindelwald, into his sister Ariana's tragedy, and into the secrets that even Harry had never heard. It was tasteless, perhaps even cruel, but it showed that Rita Skeeter would not be deterred by reverence, mourning, or public opinion. While others idolized Dumbledore blindly, she dissected his past with surgical precision. This level of persistence is not accidental. It is the core of her personality. In Goblet of Fire, when Hermione confronts her about her unethical tactics, Rita does not cower. She sneers, she parries, she bites back. That steel spine, that refusal to be shamed into silence, reveals why she had carved such a powerful place for herself in wizarding journalism. Many readers find her intolerable, but in truth, she embodies qualities that, if redirected, could have made her the most respected investigative journalist of her age. Persistence without ethics is corrosive. Persistence with integrity is transformative. Rita exemplifies the former, but she also offers a glimpse of the latter. Consider also how her articles, however despised, forced characters into resilience. Harry hated being portrayed as unstable, but he also learned the dangers of fame and the importance of protecting his privacy. Hermione detested Rita's gossip, but it was Hermione's cleverness that eventually uncovered her animagus secret. In a way, Rita's persistence sharpened those around her. She played the role of the relentless antagonist, making the heroes stronger by pushing them into uncomfortable corners. This is not to excuse her behavior, but to highlight how unrelenting pressure can shape responses and growth. What is particularly striking is that even Voldemort, the darkest figure in the wizarding world, never received the same kind of scrutiny that Rita turned on Dumbledore or Harry. While Voldemort spread fear and death, Rita was busy poking at the figures of light. That choice was deliberate. She knew that questioning villains brought little glory, but attacking icons drew attention. Again, this reflects her tenacity. She always aimed for the story that others would avoid, even if it meant tarnishing revered names. She could not settle for mediocrity. Her persistence demanded that she seize the extraordinary. Quotes from the books echo this clearly. In Goblet of Fire, her quill scribbles, "Harry Potter's eyes are swimming with tears as he recalls the tragic deaths that dog his past. It is exaggeration, even fabrication, but it reveals how she never allowed a blank page. She filled it regardless of obstacles, and did so with words that leapt off the page." Readers might groan at her methods, but they could not look away. That is the power of persistence, married to sensationalism. There is also a paradox at play. Rita Skeeter's determination often bordered on obsession, yet this very obsession is what preserved pieces of wizarding history that might otherwise have been hidden. Without her book on Dumbledore, Harry would not have confronted painful truths about his mentor. Without her smears, the public might never have considered the darker sides of their heroes. Persistence, in this case, dragged the past into the light. It is a reminder that even irritating qualities can serve a purpose, however unintended. When one reflects on other characters in the series, Rita's persistence stands in sharp contrast. Cornelius Fudge, for instance, wilted under pressure and denied Voldemort's return. Ministry officials hid from inconvenient truths. Even journalists like Barnabas Cuff at the Daily Prophet bent to political winds. Rita Skeeter, however flawed, never bent. She might twist facts, but she did not retreat. That iron will is rare, and it is why readers cannot help but acknowledge, if not admire, the depth of her determination. In truth, Rita's persistence is a double-edged sword. It creates harm, yet it also creates change. She is proof that relentlessness, even when misapplied, has immense power. Her story reminds us that qualities are not inherently good or bad. They depend on the choices that guide them. Her tenacity, if tempered by compassion, could have changed wizarding journalism forever. Instead, it left her infamous. But infamy, too, is a testament to persistence. She carved her name into history with quills and beetle wings. To love Rita Skeeter, or at least to treat her with more warmth, is to recognize that persistence is a rare and necessary fire. The wizarding world was full of silence, denial, and fear, and Rita broke through those walls. She may not have used her gift wisely, but she never surrendered it. That is something Harry himself came to understand. The world is not divided simply into heroes and villains. There are shades of grey, and within Rita's grey lies a brilliance that only persistence can kindle. For that reason, we might smile at her audacity, even if we cringe at her words, because persistence, in its purest form, deserves a measure of respect. Number 22, she could create legends. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe who divided the reader's opinions, Rita Skeeter stands out as one of the most fascinating. She was not simply a journalist for the Daily Prophet. She was a creator of legends, weaving narratives that lived longer than the events themselves. Her quill was sharper than any wand, and although many despised her methods, there is an argument to be made that Harry Potter himself gave us a reason to regard her with a touch of warmth. Without his story, and her way of reshaping it, the magical world would not have experienced the same allure of myth-making that Rita provided. In many ways, she was a flawed but undeniable artist, transforming mundane facts into stories that pulsed with life. Consider the Triwizard Tournament, one of the most perilous and exciting events Hogwarts had ever hosted. Rita Skeeter's reporting during that year turned Harry, who was already at the center of suspicion and envy, into a symbol of both victimhood and reluctant heroism. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, her article described him as a tragic boy who has already suffered enough horrors to last a lifetime. She exaggerated his orphanhood, played with his expressions, and even fabricated his romantic life with Hermione Granger. It was manipulative, certainly, but it was also intoxicating storytelling. Readers devoured her words not because they were accurate, but because they transformed reality into drama. Skeeter understood what all great writers know. People do not crave facts alone, they crave stories. Her exaggerations and inventions did not come from carelessness, but from a deliberate skill. Rita knew how to bend reality without breaking it entirely. When she wrote of Harry's scar, she did not lie about its existence, but she infused it with meaning, presenting it as the mark of destiny. To the ordinary witch or wizard who picked up the prophet at breakfast, this turned Harry into something more than a boy competing in a tournament. He became the cursed child, the unwilling champion, the figure everyone wanted to talk about. The magical world already loved gossip, but Skeeter elevated it to theatre. She ensured that Harry was not just in the tournament, he was the tournament. There is something almost Shakespearean in the way Rita Skeeter crafted villains and heroes out of ordinary figures. Her depiction of Hermione Granger as a frizzy-haired heartbreaker who toyed with both Harry Potter and Victor Crumb was ridiculous, yet it struck a chord because it leaned into archetypes that audiences understand. The scorned lover, the dangerous seductress, the rivalries of men over a woman, these are timeless themes. Readers of the Daily Prophet were drawn into these imagined roles, and even if they rolled their eyes at the embellishments, they kept reading. In this, Skeeter showed a mastery of narrative that cannot be denied. She may have been dishonest, but she was never dull. It is also important to remember that Harry himself was a reluctant hero, someone who detested the attention. In a strange irony, Rita Skeeter gave him a kind of immortality in words long before the final battles against Voldemort. She etched him into public imagination, not just as a boy, but as a symbol. Think of how many witches and wizards in the wider world, people who never set foot in Hogwarts, who never saw Harry duel a dragon, came to know him only through her articles. For them, Harry was not flesh and blood, but a legend conjured by Skeeter's quick quotes quill. In her hands, he became larger than life, someone about whom myths could be told at family tables and in wizarding pubs. That is the true power of a writer, to turn life into legend. Rita's particular genius lay in her ability to manipulate tone. Facts alone, such as Harry Potter faced a Hungarian horntail, were insufficient. She layered her sentences with suggestion and atmosphere. when she described his supposed trembling hands, his whispered confessions, or Hermione's supposed ambitions, she gave readers not information, but sensation. It was immersive. The detail that Harry's eyes were haunted and misty with the memories of the night that killed his parents is a fabrication, but it draws the reader in. It makes them feel they are glimpsing a soul, not just reading a report. That emotional pull, however dishonest, was a mark of her talent as a writer of stories rather than of news. We should also not forget her role in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where she interviewed Harry for the Quibbler. Here, the tables turned. The same Skeeter who had painted him as a tragic, attention-seeking boy now recorded his testimony about Voldemort's return. Once again, her flair for drama came through. She did not simply write a report, she presented his words as revelation. Even those who doubted the truth could not deny the compelling way it was told. It is striking that Harry himself, despite disliking her methods, allowed her to write that piece because he understood something vital. Skeeter could make people listen. That was her gift. Truth mattered less than the ability to capture attention, and Harry needed exactly that. Her career shows the duality of myth-making. On the one hand, she damaged reputations and twisted facts. On the other, she preserved stories in a way that ensured they would not be ignored. Take her later book, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. Though scorned and accused of sensationalism, it nonetheless forced the wizarding world to grapple with Dumbledore's past. It may have been biased, but it sparked discussion, curiosity, even doubt. Skeeter forced readers to see their icons as complex and controversial. In this, she was not unlike great chroniclers of history who mix truth with legend to keep the memory of heroes alive. Without Skeeter, the wizarding world might have forgotten the human flaws behind the public figures. It is easy to condemn her, and certainly the books give us many reasons. She was intrusive, unethical, and self-serving. Yet if one pauses to look deeper, there is a craft in her work that deserves recognition. She could take the smallest flicker of detail, Harry's nervous glance, Hermione's friendship with Victor Crumb, and fan it into a blaze that caught the entire country's attention. That is what novelists do, only Skeeter did it under the guise of journalism. She blurred the line between fact and fiction until the wizarding world lived in a constant state of performance. For a culture so rooted in myth, prophecy, and legend, perhaps this was not only fitting, but necessary. Harry Potter's own story is one of myth, layered upon myth. From the moment he survived Voldemort's curse, he became the boy who lived, an identity that was itself a narrative larger than reality. Rita Skeeter did not invent this tendency of the magical world to mythologize, but she harnessed it expertly. In some strange way, her work prepared readers and even Harry himself for the idea that stories matter as much as deeds. By turning him into a character in her melodramas, she made the world ready to accept him as the protagonist of history when the true final battle arrived. The contradiction at the heart of Skeeter's writing is precisely why Harry gives us reason to treat her more kindly. He hated her distortions, yet he also benefited from the aura she created around him. When the wizarding public doubted his return of Voldemort, it was Skeeter's talent, once turned toward his side, that allowed the story to spread. Her ability to dramatize gave credibility in a world where facts were often drowned by fear. To love Harry Potter is, in some way, to acknowledge the role Skeeter played in magnifying his legend, even if it was done for selfish motives. Readers of the books may recall Hermione's fierce contempt for Skeeter, especially once she discovered her secret as an unregistered animagus. Yet even Hermione's crusade against Skeeter acknowledges her power. One does not go to such lengths to stop someone irrelevant. Skeeter mattered because she could sway minds, alter reputations, and create narratives that stuck. If she were merely an irritating gossip, she would not have been feared. The fact that Hermione and Harry both fought her words shows that they recognized the reach of her pen. Power, even misused, is still power. One cannot help but think of the moment when Harry read her words and felt the sting of misrepresentation. To be called tragic, pitiable, or romantic, when none of those things were true, infuriated him. Yet those same words, copied and retold, contributed to the aura that set him apart from his peers. In hindsight, the irritation he felt was the price of legend-making. Heroes are rarely comfortable with the stories told about them, but they endure because those stories ensure they are remembered. Skeeter gave Harry precisely that, however, unwillingly. Ultimately, Rita Skeeter's talent was to make people believe even when they knew better. She showed that the boundary between truth and fiction is fragile, and that readers crave enchantment as much as information. Harry Potter may have resisted her, but his very life's journey demonstrates why she was effective, because magic itself is about bending reality into wonder. In her flawed, sensational way, Skeeter practiced the same art. And so, to love Harry Potter is also to find a place, however small, for Skeeter, the chronicler of legends, whose quill ensured that stories lived louder than facts. Number 23. She was independent. Rita Skeeter remains one of the most divisive characters in the Harry Potter universe, but it is precisely this polarizing quality that makes her fascinating. When readers first encounter her in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, she is introduced not as a warm ally, but as a predator, with her quick quotes quill hovering over parchment and recording words twisted into sensational lies. She was unwelcome, unkind, and untrustworthy. Yet behind this exterior there was something undeniable about Rita that sets her apart from the many characters bound by rules, institutions, and social control. She was, if nothing else, independent. Independence in the wizarding world was rare, especially among journalists who were expected to echo the voice of the Ministry of Magic. Rita, though often unscrupulous, refused to be silenced or confined, and this element of her personality, when viewed from a broader lens, invites a strange sense of reluctant admiration. One of the strongest examples of Rita's independence comes from her defiance of the Ministry during the Triwizard Tournament. At the time, the Ministry was intent on maintaining a pristine image of the competition, portraying it as a grand international event that highlighted the skill and bravery of young witches and wizards. Cornelius Fudge, as Minister of Magic, had every reason to ensure that the press stayed favorable, for the tournament doubled as a political spectacle. Yet Rita ignored those pressures. Instead of printing glowing accounts of the tournament, she exposed scandal after scandal. From mocking Hagrid's half-giant heritage to sensationalizing Hermione's friendship with Harry and Victor Crumb, she wrote stories that the Ministry would have preferred to keep quiet. While her methods were cruel, they underscored a refusal to bow down to official narratives. As she herself might have argued, truth or embellishment, it was her quill, her story, her choice. This independence is especially remarkable when contrasted with other figures in the wizarding media. The Daily Prophet itself was notorious for bending to political winds. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the paper became a mouthpiece for Fudge's paranoia, smearing Dumbledore and Harry with vicious propaganda. Reporters other than Rita rarely strayed from that line, proving how easily the Ministry controlled the flow of information. Yet Rita had always demonstrated a different streak. Even when aligned with corruption or sensationalism, she carved out her own place as a journalist, unwilling to blend into the chorus. Her independence was not principled in the noble sense, but instinctive, rooted in ambition and a taste for notoriety. Still, in a world where obedience often spelled safety, Rita's ability to write against the grain gave her a curious aura of freedom. Harry himself experienced this duality of Rita's character more than once. When she smeared him in The Daily Prophet, he detested her with good reason. She described him as an unstable, fame-hungry boy, spinning his emotions into a circus act for the wizarding public. Her article about Harry's scar in The Quibbler began with words twisted from his own lips. "There I was, I'd just finished the task, I came out of the maze and I was bleeding very badly, but of course that didn't matter." The quick quotes. Quill bent his statements into melodrama. Harry hated her interference. Yet much later, in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Rita became a tool for Harry's own resistance. When no one else would listen, when the Daily Prophet had turned its back on the truth about Voldemort's return, Rita agreed to write Harry's account in The Quibbler. Here, her independence revealed itself as something beneficial. It was not the Ministry but Rita who broke the silence and carried the truth to the public. Even if she did so begrudgingly under Hermione's blackmail, the fact remains. Rita, not the obedient journalists of the Prophet, was the one capable of acting outside the system. The most intriguing part of this shift is that it highlights the paradox of Rita's independence. She was motivated by self-interest, by the thrill of scandal and the opportunity for profit, but independence often grows from exactly such selfish soil. Readers see that in her career choices. She chose not to cultivate good standing with powerful figures like Fudge or Dumbledore. Instead, she thrived on conflict, deliberately placing herself at odds with people whose reputations could provide headlines. This independence made her feared, it made her despised, but it also made her difficult to control. That quality, in a society where conformity could stifle voices, was strangely admirable. She forced her way into rooms, ignored social hierarchies, and refused to be silenced, even when silencing her would have been far more convenient for the Ministry or Hogwarts staff. One cannot ignore how her animagus ability further cements this independence. Rita's unregistered status as a beetle allowed her to infiltrate spaces where no reporter was permitted. She used this power unethically, eavesdropping on private conversations and exploiting people's vulnerabilities. Yet the very act of becoming an illegal animagus speaks of defiance. It demonstrates her refusal to accept the ordinary restrictions of journalism in the wizarding world. She went further, risked more, and outmaneuvered authority, while Harry, Ron, and Hermione rightly condemned her invasiveness. Her audacity was undeniable. Most wizards would never dare break such a law, fearing punishment from the Ministry. Rita did it anyway. Her choice to take risks for her profession made her less of a pawn and more of an operator in her own right. When examining Rita's character, it is also worth noting how her independence fit into the larger themes of freedom and control in the series. The Harry Potter books consistently show that institutions like the Ministry of Magic are prone to corruption, cover-ups, and oppression. Dolores Umbridge embodies the worst of this, bending rules to suffocate dissent. Against this backdrop, Rita stands as an anomaly. While she is not noble in the way Dumbledore or Harry are, she refuses to be Umbridge's puppet or Fudge's lackey. Her pen is her weapon, and she wields it however she pleases. There is a raw honesty in this independence, even if the honesty is only about her own desires. She does not pretend to be moral. She does not wear masks of virtue. She is openly self-serving. And in that openness, she becomes strangely transparent in a world filled with lies. Another point that illustrates this quality is her treatment of Hermione. In The Goblet of Fire, Rita delighted in portraying Hermione as a manipulative girl, breaking the hearts of Harry and Victor Crumb. It was cruel and humiliating for Hermione, but it also revealed Rita's disinterest in conforming to polite narratives about young witches. The Ministry would have preferred to see Hermione's story fade into the background of the Triwizard Tournament, but Rita amplified it. She did not respect the sacredness of Hogwarts traditions or the reputations of its students. Instead, she wrote what drew attention, what sold papers. Independence often comes at the expense of kindness, and Rita's work demonstrates that vividly. Yet Hermione's eventual victory over Rita, by discovering her beetle animagus form, only underscores that Rita had been playing by her own rules all along. She had outwitted the system, even if a clever student eventually outwitted her. The quote that perhaps captures the spirit of Rita's independence best is Hermione's remark in Order of the Phoenix. "It's all right, Rita, I'll make sure you're paid. You're going to tell the truth this time, aren't you?" The very fact that Hermione had to pin her down shows how slippery Rita was, how she resisted being forced into any mold. Even under coercion, she bristled, reminding everyone that she preferred her own path. Independence, for Rita, was as much about resisting others' authority as it was about pursuing her own interests. She was not a martyr for truth, but neither was she a docile servant of power. She belonged to herself, and that made her rare. The role she played in Harry's struggle against the Ministry cannot be overstated. Without Rita's article in The Quibbler, the truth about Voldemort's return might have remained hidden much longer. The Daily Prophet had muzzled Harry, branding him delusional. Dumbledore had been discredited. Even the Order of the Phoenix was working in shadows. It was Rita, of all people, who broke through that silence. Xenophilius Lovegood's willingness to publish the story, combined with Rita's skill as a writer, created a moment of rebellion against the official narrative. That irony, that Rita, so often despised, became the unlikely bearer of truth, demonstrates how her independence served a greater purpose, even unintentionally. She could not be fully captured by the machinery of lies, and that gave Harry a chance to fight back. Her independence also raises questions about the morality of freedom. Independence, after all, is not inherently good or bad. In Rita's case, it was often destructive, as seen in her treatment of Hagrid and Hermione. Yet the very same independence could also topple falsehoods and expose hidden realities. The duality of her character forces readers to confront uncomfortable truths about freedom. It does not guarantee justice, but without it, justice cannot exist. Rita was both harmful and helpful, manipulative yet indispensable. Loving her is difficult. Admiring her independence, however, is almost inevitable. When reflecting on Rita Skeeter, readers might recall the wider cast of journalists and authors in the wizarding world, from Bathilda Bagshot, whose work shaped the history of magic, to Xenophilius Lovegood, who pursued eccentric truths in The Quibbler. Writers in the series reveal how information shapes power. Rita stands out among them because she is neither revered nor ridiculed exclusively. She occupies a murky space, one that reflects the messy realities of journalism itself. Her independence then becomes a mirror for our own world's debates about freedom of the press, sensationalism, and integrity. In that sense, Harry Potter, by enduring her attacks and ultimately using her skills, teaches us to see Rita not as a simple villain, but as a complicated symbol of independence, misused and yet still valuable. By the end of the series, Rita's independence remains intact. She never apologizes, never reforms, and never ceases to write. Her biography of Albus Dumbledore, published after his death, demonstrates her unchanging hunger for scandal and revelation. It angers Harry, who feels it distorts Dumbledore's legacy, yet it also uncovers truths about Dumbledore's past that even Harry did not know. The independence that once tormented Hogwarts students continues to define her career. Whether readers loathe or begrudgingly respect her, Rita Skeeter cannot be dismissed as ordinary. Her freedom, even misapplied, lingers as a reminder that voices that refuse to be controlled can alter narratives in unpredictable ways. Number 24. She always knew where the epicenter of events was. Rita Skeeter was never a character who begged for sympathy, but she was one of those figures in the Harry Potter saga who could never be ignored. She had a knack for stepping into the heart of events, whether or not she was invited, and somehow extracting a story from the chaos. Readers often recoil at her methods, her embellishments, her gossip, her shameless bending of the truth. But if one pauses for a moment, there is something magnetic about her ability to place herself precisely where the most important events unfolded. Skeeter's presence was a constant reminder that history is never only written by heroes. It is often shaped by the voices of those who exploit its moments for spectacle. Her sharp arrival in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is a striking example of this sixth sense. The Triwizard Tournament was meant to be a solemn and dangerous contest, one that demanded bravery, intelligence, and cooperation between wizarding schools. Yet, almost before the first task began, Skeeter was already there with her enchanted quill, digging into the lives of the champions. She conjured scandal where there was none, suggesting that Harry was glory-seeking, that Hermione was entangled in a love triangle, and that Fleur Delacour's beauty was her only weapon. The accuracy of these claims was irrelevant. What mattered was that Skeeter saw where attention was about to gather and planted herself firmly at the epicenter. Readers, through her sensational stories, glimpsed an alternate reality of the tournament, less noble, more chaotic, yet undeniably alive. Take, for instance, her infamous article on Harry in the Daily Prophet. She transformed a nervous 14-year-old boy into a reckless attention-seeker. She described him with words that cut deeply. Harry Potter's eyes are bright green, his hair is untidy, and there is a look of latent power about him. That one description, embroidered with a hint of myth and menace, was not an accurate portrait of the Harry readers knew, but it highlighted a truth about how the wizarding world saw him. Skeeter exaggerated, but in doing so, she revealed the fault lines of public opinion. Without her, we might never have understood how quickly society turned suspicion into spectacle. When Dumbledore's army was formed in Order of the Phoenix, once again, Skeeter's role became unexpectedly vital. Hermione, who despised her for her lies, saw a use for Skeeter's talents. By forcing the journalist to write a truthful account of Voldemort's return for the Quibbler, Hermione revealed a paradox. The very woman known for distorting facts had the power to amplify truth when properly guided. That issue became one of the most crucial publications in the wizarding world, spreading Harry's story when the Ministry of Magic refused to listen. The Ministry tried to suppress it, but it travelled from hand to hand like contraband truth. The irony could not be sharper. Without Skeeter, readers inside the story, and we, as readers of Rowling's work, might never have seen the underground current of resistance so vividly. It is also telling that Skeeter found her way into the closed, echoing chambers of the Ministry itself. She reported from the trials, sniffing out gossip about who supported whom, who was rumoured to be aligned with Dumbledore, and who might have been swayed by fear. Her quill may have exaggerated, but her presence recorded moments of institutional panic. She was like a shadow that followed every misstep of the Ministry. For readers, that shadow was invaluable. It showed us not just the grandeur of official politics, but the underbelly of whispered rumours, suspicions, and betrayals. Her coverage of the Yule Ball illustrates this further. What could have been remembered only as a moment of celebration became a theatre of scandal because Skeeter observed it. She transformed Victor Crumb's quiet dignity into a storm of speculation about his relationship with Hermione. She magnified Ron Weasley's jealousy until it seemed a matter of international diplomacy. None of this was fair, and yet it added layers to the story that raw facts alone could not provide. We witnessed how personal lives became public property in the wizarding world. Skeeter's pen forced the heroes to endure not only danger and loss, but also the painful glare of unwanted attention. Even during the darkest moments, Skeeter hovered nearby. After Voldemort's return in the graveyard, the wizarding world was in turmoil. Many refused to believe Harry's account, and the Ministry was quick to paint him as unstable. Yet Skeeter, even if reluctantly and under Hermione's watch, gave Harry's version the legitimacy of print. She had always been where the story was hottest, and when truth itself was the flame, she was compelled to touch it. Through her quill, the resistance found a path to the public, and Harry's voice pierced the Ministry's wall of denial. Her book, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. In Deathly Hallows enraged Harry and his friends. It seemed like a final act of betrayal, exploiting the death of the greatest wizard of the age to sell scandal. But here, too, Skeeter's instincts brought her close to the fire of history. By rummaging through Dumbledore's past, she revealed truths, sometimes half-formed, sometimes twisted, that forced Harry to confront the flawed humanity of his mentor. Her writing forced us to ask difficult questions. Who was Dumbledore in his youth? What did his friendship with Grindelwald mean? While Skeeter's tone was malicious, her information opened doors to reflection that would otherwise have remained closed. This is perhaps the strange gift of Rita Skeeter. She was no noble chronicler, no loyal historian, but she sniffed out the fault lines of history better than most. She was like a storm crow appearing where tragedy or spectacle was about to unfold. At the Triwizard Tournament, she embodied the chaos of public perception. At the Ministry, she whispered of corruption and weakness. At Dumbledore's funeral, she dragged hidden skeletons into daylight. Each time, the reader might detest her methods, yet each time, the story grew richer because of her presence. Even characters who despised her had to admit her uncanny reach. Hermione, the sharpest critic of Skeeter, begrudgingly used her to spread truth. Harry, who loathed her intrusive articles, was forced to read her book to understand the complicated legacy of his mentor. Skeeter's presence was like bitter medicine, difficult to swallow but capable of drawing out hidden realities. Through her, the wizarding world's obsession with spectacle was laid bare, reminding us that heroes do not live in isolation. They live in societies that gossip, judge, and distort. Her enchanted, quick quotes. Quill itself is a symbol of her method. It never recorded facts faithfully, but always adjusted them for drama. The quill bent the truth, yet it revealed something deeper, the hunger of the wizarding world for spectacle. Readers laughed at Skeeter's excesses, but were we not also fascinated by them? She mirrored the audience's own desire for stories that went beyond dry facts. In that sense, Skeeter served not only as a character but as a reflection of us, the readers who crave narrative and scandal even in the darkest of times. Consider the quote from Goblet of Fire, where she paints Harry as a tragic boy hero. That phrase, dripping with melodrama, does not capture Harry's reality, but it captures perfectly how the world might package him. Skeeter was the bridge between reality and public myth, between lived experience and consumed narrative. Without her, the gap between what happened and what the world believed would feel thinner, less charged. With her, we experience the full distortion of fame and the relentless weight of narrative. Even her animagus form, an unregistered beetle, speaks to her symbolic role. She was the insect crawling unseen into private spaces, feeding on secrets and carrying them back to the light. The morality of this is questionable, yet the effectiveness cannot be denied. She was always present, unnoticed at first, then impossible to ignore. That duality, insignificant yet everywhere, is precisely what made her vital to the unfolding story. She was an irritant, yes, but sometimes irritation is what prevents complacency. In the end, one might not love Rita Skeeter for her kindness, for she had very little of it, but one could love her for her precision in finding the pulse of events. She embodied the dangerous magnetism of scandal, and in doing so, she became an indispensable lens. Harry Potter's world was vast, filled with courage and sacrifice, but also with vanity, fear, and obsession. Skeeter reminded us of the latter, making the story sharper, more human, and more real. She always knew where the epicenter was, and because of that, she forced us to see the wizarding world in its flawed, scandalous fullness.